Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR leaders. Today's guest is Shalini Sarin. Shalini is the Senior Vice President of HR and CSR at Philips Lighting. Shalini, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm really honored to be here.
Fantastic. Well, Shalini, tell HR leaders a little bit more about yourself and your journey to becoming the Senior Vice President of HR and CSR at Philips Lighting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been around for nearly 3 decades now, seems forever. I started my journey as a teacher and a researcher of organization behavior, and specifically culture and climate of the organization. I don't really know when I meandered from teaching to consulting and in the area of OB. During my consulting days, one of the biggest opportunities that I had was to be in a task force team with PricewaterhouseCoopers. This was an outstanding learning where 2 large, proud, giant cultures were marrying their technology and the methodology. After that, I've been fortunate to lead and participate in 2 IPOs, 9 acquisitions, and several reorgs and transformations. I even ended up writing a paper on the role of HR in M&A. My career spans over various sectors, geographies, from consulting to oil and gas to FMCG, and finally to the energy and manufacturing segment. Largely in Asia, but also in Europe and in North America.
Fantastic. And what on that long journey that you've had now, what really compelled you to move down the HR route and build a career in the HR industry? Or in the field of HR, sorry.
So I started as a COE. As you see, my background was in organization behavior, culture, talent, OD. So I started in COE and then meandered and enjoyed the business partnering part of my role very much. So, sorry, are you hearing a ping every time or you don't?
No.
Okay, so I hear it from my meeting invites, but I can't mute it because I'm talking to you through that. So
it's okay.
If it doesn't bother you, then it's
no, fine. We can't hear it here. It's fine.
That's fine. So you want to start? I'll start with this response again.
Yeah, and then I'll just edit it. It's fine.
Yeah. So I started as a COE in the area of OD, talent, and learning, but I enjoy my business partnering and head of HR role the best. Mm-hmm. My DNA does not allow me to create boundaries, you see. And I always try to push the envelope. And I guess that helped me to take this complete end-to-end HR role, which now even extends beyond HR to the community, which is CSR. So from working and transforming people within the organization to now helping bring the transformation in communities outside the organization as well. So, in fact, I seldom find myself keeping career targets or, keeping an end goal that I want to become this by the end of this year or by the end of this journey. All I know is that I need to put my 100% and passion and commitment in whatever I do, and the rest follows.
Fantastic. Pretty amazing. So now where you are, one of the things that I'm always fascinated to hear is, what really occupies your mind on a day-to-day basis?
Well, in the morning when I get up, the most important thing for me is to take stock of my agenda. And what occupies my mind on a day-to-day basis is, what can I do to simplify? I'm obsessed with simplification because there is enough complexity, ambiguity, and all of that in our environment, what can we do to cut waste? And that's what I continue to do, whether it's within the relationships or work environment or processes. With my background as a Six Sigma black belt, I always want to invest time in improving and simplifying.
Mm-hmm. So lean HR.
Lean HR, absolutely. Lean way of working.
Definitely. I worked for many years in the supply chain field, working on Lean and Six Sigma projects. So definitely know quite a few things about that. So great to hear that you transitioned that learning into the field of HR. Not something I hear often, to be honest, which I'm quite surprised as well. So where you are now in your role, could you share a project or transformation that you've been going through that you're most proud of?
I'm
past or present, of course.
Quite proud of several things, but I'll talk about a recent project. And the recent project that I really enjoyed very much was the cultural transformation after becoming an independent entity in Philips Lighting. Mm-hmm. So Philips is a 125 years old company, and a year and a half ago, we split from our parent company after being together for 125 years and became a standalone. And once we became a standalone, we had to create our own identity and our vision and values, our purpose. So this entire activity was very interesting and fascinating because it was co-created bottom up across the organization. You see, there are two approaches. One, you can get a bunch of very intelligent consultants like a McKinsey or a Bain or whoever, and have a set of very senior intelligent people from your organization get together and create the purpose and values of the organization, which was done in the past. But this time over, we decided as an organization to do a bottom-up co-creation. So we did a quanti and a quali data inputs on what works well, what are we proud of, what will help us get to the future, what is our ambition, what is it that we must stop doing in order to reach our ambition. And we did these workshops across levels, across regions, across businesses, and then culled the data and brought it to the leadership team. And we did a similar workshop with the leadership team. And in my past experience as well, I've always seen that there's a high correlation coefficient between what the organization says and what the leadership says. Sometimes as leaders, we feel that the organization might miss out on what we aspire to be, and therefore those values may not really appear. But it always is that the organization and people are very aware of their shortcomings as well. And they know exactly what we need to do to bridge that gap. So once we had that endorsed by the leadership team and that workshop, then the buy-in of those vision, the purpose and the values across the organization and how it translates into action becomes so much easier because the buy-in is already created. Mm-hmm. And that's how then we disseminated those values, the purpose across the organization through storytelling, through contextualizing in everything that we do and embedding it in every process, whether it is selection or performance appraisal or succession planning or even the way we conduct our business reviews. Mm-hmm. So that has become an integral part of driving our business and achieving our ambition.
Fantastic. And what were the sort of biggest challenges that you had to overcome for whilst going through that process?
Some of the challenges that we faced while going through that process was when we administered the quanti data, we did not get enough responses. and then we had to substantiate it with quali, doing workshops and town halls and communication. But the penetration could have been more had the quanti data or the respondent size was even larger. Some of the other challenges which we continue to face is that in an organization, there are always multiple things that are happening at all points in time. And therefore, how do you get this on top priority for the organization to pay attention to? And the last and the most important, which we continue to do, is how do you integrate it into way of life?
Yeah, not just a one-off. That's the hard part, right? That's the hard part, making it and not just a one-off, but as part of the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Not one-off, not on top of, not driven by HR, not driven by leaders, but by employees and the self-governance, so that it becomes a way of life.
Exactly. Going back to the point you mentioned earlier about the not getting enough responses when you first rolled this out, looking back, what do you think you could have done differently to get more responses from the employees?
I think what we did later on through our social network, which is within the organization. So we have our communities page. We could have leveraged that more. We did that later on, and we could have leveraged the local champions, which we did very soon. Our market leaders, market HRs, communication teams, factory leaders, sales leaders. So at every level, all the leaders in each role and each capacity were then animated. But that could have been done even while getting quantitative responses.
Fantastic. So really having everyone driving in the same direction and all of the members of the team pushing that message out to the business, really, from up, top down and from down upwards to both ways. Fantastic. And what was the where we are now in the business? What have you seen as the results and the impact of that transformation?
I think we see that coming up in so many different areas that I could spend the next 1 hour just talking about the various stories. But I think most importantly, one of our core values is customer first. And though a lot of organizations inherently work towards satisfying the customer needs, calling it out and what are the behaviors, therefore, underneath that value that we strongly feel about make the difference. So now it just gets called out, and when it gets called out, it gets lived, and then it gets reinforced, and therefore it kind of magnifies. You see, anything that you want to grow, you need to talk about it. If you talk about the weaknesses, they will grow. If you reinforce the positives, they will grow. And you have a choice what you want to grow.
Definitely. Fantastic. So where you are now, you've gone through this great change. It's obviously still ongoing, right? I'm sure it's never going to be something which is a project. It's a way of life, right? It's just how the company is then going to live, breathe, and that's going to be the culture of the organization. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for improvement now in the business?
I think the biggest opportunity in a matrix environment is always how do we get the teams to work together? And therefore, one of our values is also greater together. And it helps remind people the value of the collective, that it's not the individual stars or the individual teams or businesses that get rewarded, but it's the collective. And that's the challenge that we continue to work towards to really make the maximum impact to the end customer.
And how are you currently in HR encouraging that collaboration? What are you doing in HR to encourage that collaboration between the teams?
Yeah, and several initiatives. So I'll talk from learning and university perspective. The teams that come for the programs are not business wise, but they are across functions and across businesses. And that's when people get into a collective learning opportunity. They make a lot of friends, they work together, they break the silos. And then when after that learning opportunity, when they go back, they know now whom to reach out to.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next one is incentive programs. So even the incentive programs are designed in such a manner that there is a large weightage given to the collective rather than the individual component.
Mm-hmm.
And that breaks the silos, because that also, whether you want or not, drives your behaviors, your
Sure,
KPI.
you're rewarding that type of behavior rather than the individual behavior.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So I've talked about the learning opportunity. I've talked about the rewards, the KPIs. How do you do goal setting, and how those interdependencies are called out is another area that we work on, and to make sure that we break those silos. The fourth area that we incorporated is in our performance appraisal, getting feedback from your stakeholders in the mandatory field. So that becomes extremely important, that you're not just doing what your manager or your business asks you to do, but you're working in a cross-functional team towards the objective, the deliverable.
And I think also a great part of that as well is it encourages that collaborative, from that type of collaboration becomes the best innovation in the business. Because if you never did that and you never got exposed to working with those other teams, you'd never make those connections. And a lot of organizations that are out there that are seen as innovative, the best products come within and from those collaborations. So the fact that all of your different learnings are geared towards that type of end result is fantastic. And I suppose that's also part of the Philips DNA, which keeps Philips where it is right now as an innovative, forward-thinking business. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And though as the culture leader, I was leading this project, I didn't really have a direct reporting with the team. I had a fantastic high-performance team, but it was reporting into various different leaders, and it was pulled together to bring this project to fruition. So that was a kind of a virtual team, which was fantastic to drive and emulate the same by breaking the silos.
Mm-hmm. Great. In terms of looking forward in HR, we've spoken about this before, but I'm interested to get your thoughts on it. What skills do you feel that are going to be more important in the future for HR, and how are you currently preparing your team for that change?
So the skills that are becoming more important are, I think, the ability to influence without control, working in a matrix, continuous learning and adapting, because today and tomorrow we will not have very well-defined teams with people directly reporting to you, but you have to influence. The ability to work with a paradox where it's not just people focus or task focus, but it's both. It's just not growth mindset alone, but it's also cost consciousness. I'm downsizing and upscaling at the same time within the business.
Yeah.
And most important is to understand the business context, the market forces, to make short-term and long-term decisions at the same time. And lastly, the ability to take a distance and be objective.
Mm-hmm. And how do you instill that in your team and ensure that they're prepared for these encounters and those type of learnings?
Chris, I really believe in a lot of on-the-job coaching. So in every opportunity that we have, every example that comes up in our day-to-day or strategic discussions or decisions, I think my job is always to remind myself and the team how to take a distance and be objective, fact-based on decisions.
Fantastic. That's great. That leads us pretty nicely on to the quickfire round, Shalini. So what I'm going to do now is going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no more than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior executive leader in HR?
I think the ability to let you go and flow with the tide, and not have the fear in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And what's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
Early in my HR career, I was advised to know and understand the business and what helps the company make money and lose money before I advised my business leaders. And I think that was a very good piece of advice.
I can only imagine. Yeah, fantastic. Definitely a great piece of advice. What's one book that you would recommend to our audience, and why?
The book Execution by Larry Bossidy is one of my favorites. And the reason is because it's practical and action-oriented.
Mm-hmm. What is it that you've taken away from it that's helped you in your career?
I think translating the vision into specific actions is something that I've always break it into smaller chunks, doable chunks, put a review mechanism in place. So the whole thing about translating a dream into reality.
Mm-hmm. Breaking it down into smaller goals rather than one big goal, which is obviously easier to achieve, track, manage, etc. Okay, fantastic. And share one sort of internet resource that you use to either increase your productivity or perhaps stay in tune with current events in HR.
I use LinkedIn a lot, and
who doesn't?
LinkedIn, Pulse, which is connected to LinkedIn, HBR, and McKinsey Quarterly. These are my all-time favorites.
Great. And what's one thing in your business that you're most excited about today?
I'm really excited about the renewable space. And the sustainability part of it. Mm-hmm.
Which is now being added to your role, right?
Which is now being added to my role.
If you didn't already have enough work to do, now you've added that. So, Shalini, you've been a great guest, and I really thank you for providing our listeners with some actionable advice. So I definitely know they'll be a lot better off for it. So thank you for that. Give our listeners a parting piece of guidance, and also the best way to connect with you.
So before I talk about the parting piece of guidance, I'd like to share one quote, and that's always been my favorite quote by Mahatma Gandhi. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. And I think that is what I believe in, and that is what I would leave as a piece of advice. Find a purpose for yourself, implement and get the commitment to do it yourself before you get to influence others.
Fantastic. And the best way to get in contact with you?
LinkedIn.
I knew that was coming, but I thought I'd ask anyway. Fantastic. Well, look, thank you again. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Guys, make sure you head over to hrdleaders.com. There you'll find the show notes on the episode and everything we've been talking about, timestamps, links to the resources, etc. Shalini, thank you again for sharing your journey with HR Nation, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris.